I was slightly concerned about the aubergine, but I wasn't sure if I was supposed to dress like that. That was a little bit of a worry. I'm here at Royal Enfield with Adrian Sellers from Royal Enfield at the Technology Centre, and we're here obviously to talk about motorcycles. But before we talk about motorcycles, Adrian, tell us what you do at Royal Enfield first of all.
So I'm one of the group managers for industrial design. It means I oversee one of our platforms. We have a couple of people like me who do this, and it ensures we have a spread out workflow and get all these models made going into the future. We also do the customization as part of our purview here, and that's not just in the UK, but also in our India facility as well. We have a team over there as well who manage that side of the world, and we sort of try to play back and forth between these different worlds of production and customization, and try to bring them together as much as we can.
So obviously we're here to talk about the Bike Shed Royal Enfield collaboration project, which started at the beginning of lockdown. Obviously the Bike Shed London show had to be cancelled, and of course what everybody really should be doing when they're forced to stay at home is get into a lockdown project. So we started the conversation then. Obviously we've been doing a lot of stuff together over the years, and with the new 650 twins that everybody seems to be enjoying riding so much, we were really keen to do something. So the idea was that we'd get together, come up with a brief and a plan, and some of you guys would have seen on our Instagram feed throwing some ideas around about a collaboration build. And I think the idea for me was to take the Interceptor, which is already a great kind of upright bike that's really good for kind of the urban environment, and we see a lot of our Bike Shed customers coming in on those, and give it that kind of East London Bike Shed brat style treatment, and create a bike for an urban East London environment. So that was the plan, that was the brief, and we've got a couple of the stock bikes here which we could probably drag Dan over to come and have a look at. Should we look at the shiny one, since it's in a nice white cove for Dan's shots? So I think that the thing for me about this is, what you always want with any custom build, from my point of view, is as little work to do as possible. My whole background in custom building is that I'm not a custom builder in any way, shape or form, but for most of my biking years, the manufacturers didn't make motorcycles I liked. So I only did work to my bikes because I was changing the bits I hated. In the last 5 years or so, the world's a much better place, and now manufacturers tend to make bikes that look pretty good out of the box. So for me, the starting process is you take a bike like this, you throw away the reflectors on the bottom of the forks, you take the mirrors off, you deal with the indicators that are probably built to a price, and you start stripping it away. And straight away, even with a bit of Photoshop deleting, you very, very quickly get to a really nice motorcycle with a nice shaped frame, a really nice fuel tank that doesn't need changing, with the right kind of configuration. The whole thing has already got a good silhouette before you even start.
This is the advantage of being a very design-centric company. That's such a big part of what we do, is making sure they look right, because if they don't, nobody's going to buy them. And since we don't have a whole lot of body work or anything,
you can't hide things behind a fairing.
So that's again part of every brief we get is if there's going to be technology, or if there's going to be wires or hoses or whatever, they really need to be integrated as best you can. We're big on not putting covers on things. We don't want to hide anything, but at the same time we do need to make sure everything sort of works in just the right way. So there are endless meetings about how to tuck wires and hoses and cables and what have you, just in order to keep it as clean and tidy and as you say, appearing easy to customize as we possibly can.
I think I'd really want us to build a bike that when people see it at the Bike Shed or see any videos we make where they kind of go, well, I could do that. Obviously we can take advantage of the fact we're in this facility and you've got a workshop around the corner and you can pretty much build anything, as you've shown. But I really want to keep the DNA, and one of the things for me that I love most about the bike, apart from the fact it's got a nice shaped fuel tank, is actually the engine. And the fact that there's a really nice looking 650 twin in there, and it's got those classic lines, the kind of thing that when you draw an engine, you start with your big oval bottom end and then you end up with you know, kind of fins on an upright at the front with the air coming into the back and exhaust fumes going out the front via an upswept pipe. So I think we really want to keep that in place. And I think the overall feel of the bike, you know, and that's kind of traditional frame wrapped in a V shape round the side panels. I mean, everything is kind of where it needs to be. So I think it's about how we give it that kind of urban brat London feel and try and keep as much as we can, and maybe inspire a few people to do a similar thing themselves. Excited to get stuck in, and you guys pretty much passed this to your whole global design team, didn't you?
Everybody likes an opportunity to sketch. You know, part of our design process, you can end up for months, if not more, with just working on CAD models or bringing something into production. So when anybody gets an opportunity to put pencil to paper or pen to screen, they take it. So everybody got engaged, both here and also in our India studio. So it's a genuine effort across all of the facilities.
Well, shall we go over to the table? Because how many different designers did you actually get doing this? Because you flooded us with dozens and dozens of quite detailed renders.
About 8-10 different designers contributed in one form or another. So we've got a real mix and match of, you know, we just opened up to everybody. Everybody just dug in and yeah, it's been fun to see all the wildly different takes on it as well. Everything from the super refined to the much more, let's say, bratty and irreverent proportions and everything in between. So.
Well, they got a lot of good feedback on Instagram. This one got a lot of comments. The tough mug. Yep. Literally taking built like a gun to a very literal level, complete with kind of wood sort of stock inspired finishes, and obviously breaking the rules with knobbly tyres and a high pipe, but it's certainly a look. I was slightly concerned about the aubergine, and I wasn't sure if I was supposed to dress like that. That was a little bit of a worry.
I think obviously it's an interpretation on the bike shed. It's a compliment, I think.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, you know, I hate to use the word hipster in anything we ever do, but that pretty much nailed that. But there's some really interesting things here. So, I mean, obviously it's difficult to pour over all of them in detail, but let's start to talk about the stuff that sort of really stands out and pops for me. My problem is always, I'm a bit old school traditionalist, and just everything ends up being black. And simple, and then I end up building bikes where there's really nothing to talk about because it's just an engine with wheels and I've painted it all black, and I've tried to make everything go away, and you know, and you'll be lucky if you can find the indicators or the front fender.
We try to do that in all our sketches as well. We have a judicious use of shadow whenever presenting a future sketch.
Yeah, excellent.
Hides all the ills.
Well, that's what we need. Well, I think let's really talk about the silhouette, because I mean, actually, and one of the great things is everybody's heading in the same sort of direction. We have got the fat tyres. I mean, I have to say, I am a big fan of, firstly, wire spoke wheels. Solid wheels kind of look cool, but it feels outside the wheelhouse of the brat thing. And I guess...
You did a little bit old school in it.
Yeah, it's kind of okay, but you know, you're always putting covers on there. You're usually adding weight. And I think part of the spirit of a build like this is about stripping down, taking away weight. Yeah. You know, I think I'm always in favour of taking everything off a bike that you can. If you're putting things on a bike, you know, you've always got to question why it's on there. So I'd probably want to stick with spoke wheels. Okay. And I think we should go for, you know, I think it would feel a bit weird to put scrambler tyres on, although I quite like, in London, it actually, you know, those TKC 80s, they actually work pretty well on London's rough and crappy roads. So I think, you know, everybody's kind of heading roughly in the same direction. Yeah. And I think when you've got a black rim on a fat tyre, you end up with all of that being one big mass. You get a really good wheel silhouette. Yeah,
it's a sort of a wonderful caricature of it. You know,
yeah.
Two big circles on either end, and then your engine sits right in the middle.
Yeah, and brat style bikes like flat trackers, they look great for having the front and the rear wheel matched in size.
Very much so.
You know, which actually, when you really look at motorcycles, not many motorcycles are like that in any way, shape or form, but both those kind of two types of bike do have that, and it's something sort of satisfying about that. Yeah. I mean, while we're talking about the front end, I mean, I have always headed to the traditional, normal, Bates style, bottom yoke mounted, sort of simple, small bucket 6.5-inch headlight, and then you pull it in as tight to the yokes as possible. But I feel as though maybe I should be a bit challenged on that and be a bit more interesting, because to be frank, that's fairly boring. I really like this
Ferret in a little bit.
Yeah, the fed in, which is kind of a little bit, it reminds me a little bit of the JVB motor. A lot of people have done that kind of thing where it's almost like the upper fork shrouds, they wrap around the shroud, and then a similar style shape, or probably 6.5 inch light, is then Frenched right into the whole of that front end.
Beef up the front end a little bit, so it'll balance with your chunkier profile as well.
Well, especially if we keep right way up forks, it allows you to wrap around the top part of the fork, almost like a little fork shroud. And we talked a little bit, I talked with Rahul, obviously who's part of this project, about gaiters. I always kind of associate gaiters with scramblers, but I mean they are just a functional way of protecting the upper part of the fork. So I'm kind of fairly open on that. But this front end here looks really good to me. You've got big fat front tyre, you've got nice short fender. I mean, I don't like riding bikes without fenders. It's super trendy and super cool, but the first time you ride through a puddle,
less fun.
Yeah, it's a lot less fun. And you know, especially at night time, and you watch your headlight illuminating an arc of rain that's coming at your face.
Nice. It's
kind of suddenly a whole lot less cool. So a nice short kind of front fender, and I think that's really well executed on the front there. And then I think the other thing that would be quite nice to play about with is having slightly higher and further pullback bars, which we've seen in a few. These are quite high, although it's hard to tell from the drawing. It looks a little bit like that might be down to the risers, I mean, some of the kind of...
On these is this one as well.
Yeah, it's
not as much pullback as you want.
Yeah, I think
any of these quite have the amount of pullback you're looking for.
Not quite as much. Yeah, this isn't so bad. Yeah, on these two. Yeah. And in a way, it's a little bit when you ride a really old classic scrambler or an older flat track bike. Yeah. And I always used to look at some of those bikes and think the bars almost looked like they were beside you, and it was sort of horrible. But when you ride them, it's actually quite nice.
Yes.
And you get a lot of leverage. So I think, still a modern take on that would be quite nice. To just come around a little would be quite good. And especially in London, as you are riding upright a lot, and you're quite often doing, I would say less than 40 miles an hour, but legally I should say less than 20 in most of London.
But of course.
So sub 20 miles an hour speeds, as we'll be riding all day. So it's nice to have that kind of relaxed position.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things we mentioned when giving sort of feedback on the first set of sketches, was that you need to have that very upright sort of, you're in the city, you need to look through traffic, you don't want to be tucked down or anything. As tempting as that always is to do a clip-ons, we need to have that sort of ready to go and maneuver kind of a positioning.
Yeah, because you need to see, and also you spend an awful lot of time moving around vehicles, so you really use the bars a lot, and there's a lot of full lock, so you want to keep as much of the lock as possible. You wouldn't want to compromise any of that, because it's terrible when a certain bike like Ducati, if you try and ride the Ducati Monster through London, they're great bikes in many other respects, but they're really bad. They got so little lock. I mean, the modern ones are a lot better, but I had an old one and it was like really hard work. So I think, that would be really good. I think tank-wise, it's such a beautiful tank, doesn't need touching. And it's just about deciding what paint is. And I think we should get to that next. I think we should worry more now about the silhouette.
Definitely. There's plenty of time to worry about the color and grading.
Yeah, and we already talked about the engine.
Yep.
I mean, when I was originally talking with Rahul, he was saying, we should black out the engine and make it really badass and black. And I do like a blacked out engine. But for me, the engine on these bikes is so pretty. And you see Winston's Roughcraft's bike that we've had in the bike shed for a long time. That kind of brushed steel, or is it polished or brushed? It's kind of like a semi between the two, isn't it? Yeah, so I'd actually really like the engine to stand out, because I think it is such a hero piece. It does look nice. So I think keep that metallic, whatever the rest of the bike's going to be.
Okay.
And pipes-wise...
You've got quite a few options.
Yeah, there's a lot of options here. And
a little high, a little low.
Yeah, I'm kind of a little bit the boring in the middle guy. I don't think scrambler pipes are right, because this is a Brat style bike. Yeah. And obviously these are kind of side-on drawings. So I'm assuming these are these going to be 2 into 2, one each side, which I think is always nice. It's a nice balance. And I am a fan of the kind of fairly traditional reverse cone, kind of, coming up and kind of heading towards the rear spindle. Sure. So for me, in a way, you're almost framing the engine. And so, it's nice to have a nice sweep. And on this bike, You know, it's a nice sweep here. It literally frames the engine. I'd probably come a little bit longer than that and go up a little bit to about here. This one does that, but it's got a kink in it, and it's always nice if there's a way. It's nice to keep that flow if you can, and if the pipe's right and works for that. And it's quite difficult to get pipes to function and bend and be mounted.
So it looks like there's not quite one.
Yeah, none of those have totally nailed it, but it's kind of like a longer version of this.
Yep. We just sort of have it aiming up a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I like the curve on this one. This one's really nice. And in fact, that may be going a bit more shallow and not coming up quite so high. I guess you've got to think about if I'm going to have...
Aim for the rear axle on it.
Yeah, if I had Vicky on the back and stuff, I don't want her to be burning her shins. So when she gets on the back. Yeah, exactly. I'm not a fan of pipe wrap.
Okay.
It's kind of, you know, it had its time, but...
It's passé now.
Well, it's not only that. When you go out for a ride with your friends and it's been raining and all this steam is pouring off their wrap, because it obviously holds all the water, and then it spends ages evaporating, and then the wrap shrinks, and then when you take the wrap off your pipe, your pipes look like shit. So
that says no to pipe wrap.
No, I'm sorry to pipe wrap fans. I'm not a fan of pipe wrap. Now, in terms of, there's always the whole question around airboxes and side panels, and a lot of people go to a huge amount of trouble to eliminate airboxes, hide batteries, all of the stuff that you guys are beautifully tucked away in behind that side panel. I'm okay with not really messing with that too much, unless you guys had an engineering desire to do that. Because you've got a really nice clean side panel design. It doesn't balloon out. It's nice and flat. It's discreet. And bikes often breathe better with a proper airbox, even if you've
Definitely makes it easier for us, because then you're not worried about repackaging all the stuff that's in there. Because quite a bit, there's airbox on a parallel twin like this. You basically have to put everything back there. Your battery, your airbox, everything is back there.
Well, I've also found you end up with tucking the battery and all the electrics under your seat, and then you've got less room for seat foam, and then you end up with a really uncomfortable bike.
You usually end up with a battery that doesn't work so well in the cold because it's...
Yeah, all of those things. And I've done that to a lot of bikes, and they look really great, and you feel like you're super cool because you can stick your fist through the subframe. But ultimately, it's a really nice design package. I mean, at the end of the day, motorcycles for me need to work and do their job first and foremost.
Well, we can play around with it. You know, we can get in once we start digging into it and get the proportions set up. I think that's obviously the number one thing we've got to do. Get the tires on there, get the rims in, get that, because once that happens, it's going to start to become what we're talking about. And as long as we've got the stock bits in there, it's not quite there yet. So once we get those in, those are the major things for defining the proportion. Then we can start running the exhaust, and we can start understanding if the side panel is right or not. Because quite often these things sort of happen as you're putting it together, and you realize that if you just went that little bit further, it makes it, or it'll be perfectly fine, doesn't make a difference, and maybe it's a matter of color and graphic.
Well, it's a balance for me, because on the one hand, you know, we're getting to build a bike with you guys, and you're the factory, and you can probably do absolutely anything. So there's a part of me that thinks of it as if I was having to do some of this stuff, I'd try and keep it simple, and you don't change the things that aren't wrong, like the tank. But on the other hand, I don't want to hold you back. So if you guys said, well, hey, there were some really interesting ideas here. I mean, there's a clear cover here. You know, we've got the scrambler pipe going through a split cover here. Is that nitrous in there? No, it's whiskey and cigars by the look of it, which is perfect. That's fantastic. So we've had a cigar kind of...
Battery or...
Yeah, tough choice. But so, I mean, I don't want to sort of hold back on creativity and ideas, and this should be a collaboration. So if you guys have got things that you want to play around with and also make it worthy of a bike that you want to show in other places.
I think what we'll probably end up doing is getting all that proportion set up and everything, and then have you buy again. And that's when we can really start, because we'll have the real thing in front of us.
Yeah.
And that's when we can really start digging into it and sort of on the fly, maybe chop up some foam and so on, and just really start sketching in 3D with it. Which is a big fun part of the process. So
in terms of the seat, I really liked quite a few of you guys really of your team really went into the whole kind of Chesterfield sofa,
really
diamond pattern kind of thing. I think that's great. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that we're bike shed, I might go, oh, that's a bit too far and a bit posy. But to be honest, we're so associated with that kind of pattern.
You've gone too far on that already. There's no going back.
Yeah, I think we have to do that. It feels right. It's already all over the place in bike shed. So I would love to do that. And I think we can think about finishes when we get past the silhouette, because obviously we have a lot of that really deep burgundy, which looks really nice, and it could look really good on a bike. But yeah, I really like the idea of doing that. And in terms of the shape, I mean, a lot of these are pretty good. I quite like the fact that whoever's drawing these ones has got this kind of slight curve to the seat, which I really like.
A little kick up at the back.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about the complete loop at the back, although I guess it's good for holding on to. But
practicality.
Yeah, it is practical, but I definitely kind of like that. Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. I mean, it's a really cool idea, but it's not brat style. If we're sticking to the brief. And also, you know, I like motorcycles where you can get someone on the back sometimes. You know, they're great transport, and it's sometimes...
It's good having an excuse not to.
It's great to have an excuse not to, but also sometimes it's nice to share with a friend. So I...
like do something proportionally here, plus a little bit of that.
I mean, I'm always, when I'm kind of sketching on bikes, I always tend to kind of aim for the rear axle up as kind of seat ending. It does depend on a little bit on the whole sort of wheelbase of the whole bike, because sometimes you can make it too short for anyone to get on the back. But that always seems to be quite a good measure. When you go shorter, they look a bit stumpy and cut off, and when you go longer...
getting a nice sort of a trapezoid coming up here.
Yeah, it is that. It's the same way as you want to kind of manage all your parallel lines that way. And, you know, it's kind of... There's a sort of natural order that I can't really explain, but you as a designer probably understand really well. And then... Again, I go a bit traditional when it gets to the back. I can't help be drawn to a bit old school, especially if we're talking, you know, brat style, to have that shorter kind of fender with the baits hanging on it. But I think I should be challenged there. I've always been, you know, when I see it well done, and I've seen it not so well done, I am a really big fan of minimal lights. And sometimes where you see the back of a frame loop, some people will French in a little LED strip. I think that looks great, and would really be a nice thing. And then I think there's a bit more flexibility on having a rear fender, or, I mean, you need somewhere to put the number plate. So I think we could then decide what that then means for the rear. So I'm kind of a bit flexible about that kind of back end.
Again, I think that is definitely one of those things where once we get the wheels all set up and the bikes are sitting there in their proportion, it'll define itself. It'll feel right or it won't feel right, and we'll just move forward from there. But I think, you know, having this little kick up here with a little bit of fender, it's going to balance that.
Yeah, I think so too. And if we can hide that light in with a little LED strip, I think that would be great.
Just bring the frame loop around like that.
Yeah.
As opposed to coming up, but just bring it all the way around the back. And I think that should, let's see if anybody's, sort of right in there.
Yeah, pretty good there.
Example.
I like the paint on this one. I like the way they've split the tank. It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. It's somehow very clean and crisp, but then there's a little funky element to it.
Yeah.
I keep a little bit of funky in here.
So then getting sort of down to, I guess, rear shocks and things. I mean, piggyback shocks are always kind of cool and racy. There are some really good options out there where you don't have a piggyback reservoir, where you either have a shrouded spring, or I've used gas shocks before. There are some good kind of performing rear shocks. I'm fairly open about that. I think because it's brat style and there's an element of old school to it, and simplicity's nice. You know, maybe getting away from that standard reservoir, especially that kind of whole Öhlins yellow spring thing. I think, it could be covered or not covered. I mean, I think I'd like to avoid the whole kind of chrome caps thing, because so I'm not a huge chrome fan. I like metal to look more metally. But yeah, I'm kind of, and a lot of it is to do is who's providing the shock and what are you trying to showcase, or is it you know, one of your OEM parts or whatever.
We'll have a look around and see what we can find.
Yeah, so I'm kind of fairly open, but I like simple. And obviously doing a good job, and quite often a lot of custom bikes end up being a little over suspended, and a lot of suspension upgrades tend to mean making your bike really rock hard, because people associate upgrades with speed, with track, and then you lose the ability to go over speed bumps and potholes. And this is a working bike,
Yeah.
so
This one's more about just sort of fun and irreverence and just playfulness.
Yeah.
Having the most expensive bit of kit you can find sticking out the front end, back end.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's no reason to have kind of a MotoGP technology sitting on the
definitive overkill.
Exactly. So yeah, I think that sort of whatever comes up as the right component parts, and in terms of kind of partners and the rest of it. But I think that pretty much wraps up the silhouette for me. I mean, we've talked about sort of tires, wheels, suspension, lighting. I mean, the only other thing I'd add is it would be great to have really super, again, minimal clocks. I don't know whether you guys want to go Motor Gadget or some other kind of workaround, or whether you want to work with the existing clocks, but it is nice when everything's tucked away. Yeah. And I'm a big fan of bar end indicators because you can see them from behind. Yeah. And my understanding of MOT law in the UK is if you can see them from behind, you don't need them at the back.
I couldn't comment.
So I'd be quite keen to have no indicators at the back, stick to the brake stop light, and have bright bar end indicators.
There was a lot of love for the whole humidor flask storage kind of situation. Is that something?
I think that's a bit where I have to be a bit more open-minded, because when I see a build like that, I always go, oh yeah, someone's just trying to be different. And but on the other hand, this is a collaboration statement build trying to make a point. There's the East London Lounge Club thing going on, so I'm really open to that, to those ideas. I mean, for me, it adds a bit of fun and a bit of interest, and there is always a danger with anything. If I do something where it's just I'm thinking about riding it, you stop doing fun things like that. True. So
ridiculous goes a long way.
Yeah, I think it is good fun. I really like this guy's. He fleshes out the tail design there on the bottom left. That's really nice. If we hadn't said brat style, I think that's really cool.
Something for next time.
Yeah, I'd love to see that get made. That would be a really nice looking thing. It's very kind of, Jetsons 1950s future space rocket. I like that a lot, but not for this build, I don't think. And also I don't mind playing around with kind of leather and stuff and other bits. I think Raoul was quite keen on etched engine covers. Mm. And I guess the only thing I would say about kind of finishes there, I think if we were going to do anything like that, I'd love it if there was an opportunity, and I know we have a lot of issues right now because of COVID-19 with shipping and stuff, because there are some really good people that do that in India. Yes, so I'd almost say if we were going to do that, I'd say get them to do it.
Couldn't agree more.
Because you don't want to kind of copy something that's being done beautifully in its home country. It'd be like, get those guys to do it. And the other thing that I loved from a long time ago is there's a really cool video on YouTube of one of your guys in the factory in India hand pinstriping a tank, and watching him work, the way he spins the tank and sweeps this perfect line. I think he does a thick line and a thin line, maybe even with the same brush. He doesn't even change the brush, he just has a different level of pressure. I mean, I don't know if there's any opportunity for us to think about whether we cross back over to India and see, time is an issue, shipping's an issue.
Well, it's something, if we're talking about it now, we look into it.
Because I think it'd be great to celebrate the artisan skills that exist in India that are already wrapped around the culture of Royal Enfield, and the skills that your guys in the factory have had for decades. It'd be a really nice homage back to the roots of the brand. But again, if we can do that, because obviously we can also be a bit more funky and get cool with logos and things like that.
We can in fact do both. Some play between the two could be interesting.
Yeah, that could be really...
traditional sort of hand-applied pinstripe, and then that integrated with say something a little bit funkier as well through it could be quite interesting to see. So.
But I mean, look, the guys have clearly put a lot of work in, and I hate to just lean at the black ones. So I think really once we get the build going, maybe let's not get too deep into paint and the rest of it.
That's fine. So that's something that we can hit once we're happy with everything else. That's the last part of the process. We can again have another meetup and get out our tape and just start marking it up and see what we come up with.
Yeah, absolutely. So shall we have a look at the place where the magic is going to happen?
Let's go do that.
Yeah. Do you want to lead me to the workshop? Careful where you point the camera, Dan. Don't point at anything naughty. So a lot of people won't know that Royal Enfield is designing and creating bikes here in the UK. Tell me about that. Tell me how that's come about and why you guys are here, and literally the relationship between the kind of Royal Enfield here and Royal Enfield in India, and how that works.
It's a very old relationship. over 50 years old. Royal Enfield, in fact, exists today because of that Indian connection. When the British motorcycling industry died, they were able to survive because we had a manufacturing plant in India producing bikes for the Indian military, among others. And so that kept going. When Royal Enfield in the UK ceased operating, that just kept going and producing Enfields, they were called. And over the years, became more and more of a cultural icon in India, and grew as a company. And in the last few years, in particular, that growth has been astronomical. And so when we went to invest back into more R&D and developing new models, it became a very natural choice to bring that also back to the UK. And sort of dig into that heritage again and the wealth of motorcycling engineering and design talent that is in the UK. And so here we are, not so far away from the original facility in Redditch.
So it's very much the best of British and the best of Indian.
Yeah.
A little bit like East London, really. Exactly like East London.
Or indeed like Leicester, where we're just there's an amazing mix of ethnicities and populations, and a huge British population, a huge Indian population.
And is this where the development of the 650 Twin happened, and where you guys pushed that into this slightly bigger, more upmarket space?
The team is here who developed the 650 Twins. Of course, everything is a co-development with our Chennai facility, so we have a technical center there as well. It's many times what you see here. A lot of that development, you need physical models and so on. And so we have this facility here, and we're in the ID studio right now, industrial design studio. We make those models in order to represent to our management what the final motorcycle will look like.
And much like the fact that we can't get too close because of social distancing, so it's slightly awkward, a bit further apart than I'd like us to be. And we also can't show you the rest of this room because we're surrounded by motorcycles, undercovers, and workstations that we can't look at. So sorry, guys. Me and Dan get to see it. You guys don't. But clearly, this is where some really cool stuff happens. There are some bikes here we can look at, and a few of these I kind of recognize. And it's really interesting seeing this 650 here, which turned up at the Bike Shed Festival last year with its twin brother, and basically smashed the field because it was such a well put together bike for that kind of sub 1 mile circuit at Liddon Hill.
We've got a lot of passionate enthusiasts here, and so this and its twins were a product of people just getting into it and saying, we've got a great base, let's see what we can pull out of it. I mean, that's fundamentally what we're trying to do with the custom program is trying to get more out. What can we do with it? Because, we're testing, when we're testing these motors or chassis or whatever, we're testing to a spec that we need to have for going into production. Where reliability is super important, where durability over X number of miles or under salt spray conditions or whatever are super important for any condition that the bike will be in. We take a little different approach. That's not a priority, whether it's going to be exposed to whatever weather, it doesn't matter to us. We have a very specific goal with each bike. In the case of Naughty and its siblings, it was about creating a great track bike based on the twins. In the case of Lockstock behind us, it was about creating a drag bike, so straight line, nothing else mattered. It had to look cool as well. Right?
Yeah.
That goes without saying. So each time we go into one of these, there's a whole different thing, and it usually just comes out of a conversation or people going, "What if?" And you're like, "Yeah, let's try it." And we've got a little bit of budget kicking around, and we can pull something in. But you know how to do turbos. Come here, and we sort of work it through that way. And it's a little different team every time because of that.
Does sound kind of like the best job in the world, I have to say.
It is a lot of fun. I mean, that's why a lot of us do it. You'll find a lot of people here are putting in more hours than they are contracted to put in, simply because it's fun.
But all the way from proper building out of clay, I mean, that whole process, I mean, it's the full works, even for basically what were just two bikes.
Yep. Well, this is something, we're familiar with. This is, for most of us, we've been doing this for many years, this process of foam and clay and finding the surface through that. It's only in the latter years where the digital aspect has become a more prevalent feature of our work. But nothing really as yet compares to getting in there and massaging the surface out of the clay. It's just a wonderful material. And so when we went to do the Naughty, it needed to be a a fairing that represented or could work very well with the motor. And as we were talking about earlier, there's that beautiful sort of organic shape, particularly to the clutch cover. And so getting that feeling also into the fairing meant that we did a digital model of it, and then we milled it out. We actually milled it out on the bike, so we just sort of parked the bike up in our mill, and just had it do its thing. And then we go back in and just work over it with the clay, make sure we get those surfaces just right. And you're running your hands over the surfaces, and it makes such a big difference for how you perceive that surface than something that you've just milled out or printed out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I've spoken to a few design engineers over recent years, and they say that what CAD designed was it made everything too squished up together because it's all about efficiency of space, and it made everything very square, and it took away all the curves. And now a lot of designers are fighting with the 3D equipment to bring the curves back, bring the flow back.
Yeah, we have quite a talented CAD team here, CAST team here, computer-aided styling, and that's because we need to maintain those features. But, for us as a brand, we can't do boxy. That's completely out of our purview. It doesn't make sense for Royal Enfield as a heritage, as an authentic company. And so we need to reference those old school forms. Even if we're doing, let's say, newer motorcycles that may be a bit more modern or something in the future, we would still reference back to those curves and so on, those very gorgeous forms that were that attract us to the historical motorcycle.
Yeah.
And so it's a must for our CAD team, is that they have to be able to do these really gorgeous surfaces. And of course, they're a real pain to do. But.
Yeah, but it's worth it. It's worth it for those organic forms. And then we've got a few more bikes here. I mean, this is, as you said, clearly a Partridge with a big thick weave, loads of carbon fibre, built with the kind of the nose down and the tail up.
Yeah, so this was featured on the Goblin Works show this past season. Went through and did the build process, and we were happy to help them out with that. Fun little build.
Yeah, and of course, Sultans of Sprint.
Yep. So this was the lock stock. We ran this 2 years ago in a one-off at the Sultans of Sprint, and we've used it for a bunch of other shenanigans around our facility as well. We have the advantage of a 2-mile drag strip essentially just in our backyard, so we use that to fullest benefit for us. But yeah, this was the start of our sort of speed trials initiative that then went on to become a Bonneville run. This bike has a sister bike that's just a bit different tail section and different belly pan and everything, specifically for the salt flats. But we took that over there, we broke some records, and that bike now resides in the U.S. It's nice to see them together. It kills me that they're separated by an ocean.
Yeah.
But, we each got to get one.
No, it looks great. It looks really, really good. So this is where custom bikes get built?
Yeah, this is the industrial design workshop. So this is where most of our in-house custom stuff is done. We'll do everything from CNC machining in the room over there. Obviously, you've seen our larger gantry mill in this room. We'll do fiberglass laying up, we'll do sanding, we'll do paint prep, and then paint in the rooms we just passed.
Okay, so what else do we need to know about this space?
So like I said, this is where it happens. We're basically set up to do everything. And in our daily job as industrial design, we need to be able to make mock-ups very quickly. And whether it be out of foam or metal or wood or clay or whatever. And so our workshop is very uniquely set up to just handle all of that. It's a jack of all trades shop. Whereas, next door to us, we've got our metal shop that works on our test bikes and everything. That's specifically for that purpose. This is about making the metal parts. We are here about making anything and quickly. And so that's why it's been very easy for us to transition that also into making custom bikes, because that's very much in the ethos of custom building, is just taking stuff and turning it into something else. Whether that's a bike you're turning into a different style of bike, or a piece of material you're turning into something that wasn't necessarily meant to be. That's what we're about here. And like I said before about the discovering it through the process, right? We'll sort that out when we get there, because we don't know what we'll find necessarily at that point in the journey. That's very much what we do here. It's about that sort of sitting back, looking at it, sort of slapping another thing on, quickly reshaping it, putting it on again, and that's That's where I have a good time. It's getting a bunch of people in here and doing that.
Yeah, it's sometimes the best bit. I love watching Max Hazan's videos where he's building bikes and he just ends up building this beautiful chassis and engine, and it looks great, and then he just sticks these big pieces of foam on top and then gets out one of what looks like one of those electric bread knives and just starts carving, and you really see the magic happen. And then sometimes he'll go, no, it doesn't work, throws it away, gets another one, and then you end up with something that really has that blend of form and function. So
what the beauty of that sort of sketching in 3D is that you can then go and sit on it too.
Yeah.
You know, so we'll have the bike here on the table and we'll be playing around with it, and then we'll get somebody on it. And sometimes you do something that'll look really amazing when you put somebody on it, it just feels really stupid. And, you know, the human is such a big part of a motorcycle. It's not like a car where you're in the car and, you know, doesn't matter. There's no difference between the car with the person in it and the car without the person in it. It's the car. It looks the same from the outside. As soon as you put a human on a bike, it changes it.
I always feel that way about bobbers because they look great, and then you sit on them, and then suddenly your arse is floating above the back wheel on a magic carpet. Everything's vanished, and it just looks strange. It's kind of they look great on their own.
But so we try to avoid that.
No, fantastic. Well, look, it's brilliant. So, should we get a bike in here? I mean, should we formally begin the process?
Why not?
Yeah, let's do that. Oh, good. The turning circle passes all tests straight away for London life. That's good. Great. Well, the project begins. So, obviously, this is going to be a fun few weeks. How long do we think it's going to take?
I think a normal build like this will probably take us a month and a half to 2 months, I think. Just, you know, there'll be a little time tearing it down. We have I think, you know, based on what we were just talking about back there, pretty good idea of some of the parts we'll want to get already. We'll look at obviously 16-inch rims, maybe run through a selection of tires. We can start thinking about, you know, what type of meter setup we want on there. Start looking at headlamps. All that can happen pretty quickly, and you guys have a pretty good network now for, you know, getting the stuff in short order, so I'm not too worried about that. That'll be the first couple of weeks. While we're waiting for those bits to come in, we'll start stripping it, get it down to the basics. At that point, we'll probably start mocking in the seat, get some foam on there, and start playing around with that shape, which will then determine what sort of cut we want to do to the rear loop there, et cetera, et cetera. We'll just sort of flow from there.
Great. So the journey begins. So next time you see this bike, it's going to look pretty different. Hopefully we'll try and come back, if we're allowed, with the COVID crisis and COVID chaos, or we'll get you and your team to send us images and pictures as we go. And we'll try and keep everybody fit to feel involved with the process and see how the build comes along. And then obviously we can have a nice reveal at the bike shed, and then we can have a first ride, then we can do some other stuff. You guys have already talked about bringing the race bikes to our track day at Brands Hatch. If this bike was ready for that, because all bikes should go on track, as far as I'm concerned. Obviously. That's the whole point of motorcycles is, you know, why not go around in circles as fast as you can? But great, I'm really excited. Shame we can't shake hands in the traditional way, since we are in the social distancing. But thank you very much. Thanks for the tour. Thanks for the insight.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
And for the project. This is going to be a lot of fun. And can't wait to get stuck in.
On we go.